Good morning, everyone. This is Veronica Watson with IHCDA. I've got Emily Krauser on with me for this webinar. She will be talking a little bit later. I'm going to go ahead and get us started. My clock says it is right at 10 o'clock, and I want to be respectful of everyone's time. I am hoping that we'll get through everything in less than an hour, but I blocked off the full hour just to make sure we had enough time for a discussion, because that's what it is really about. I've got couple of slides I want to share with everyone just to review everything that we know about the CARES Act so far, or at least as it relates to CSBG. And then I want to give an overview of what IHCDA has done so far and what we're planning to do in the next couple of weeks. And then I want to turn it over to Emily to lead a discussion on what you all are planning for these funds. So like I said, I'm hoping to get through the information pretty quickly as far as the first couple of slides, and then we'll get into discussion. Right now, you are all muted. We plan to unmute you all later during the discussion. Once that happens, please make sure that you mute yourself if you are not talking. That'll just help keep the lines clear. So while I'm talking, if you want to go ahead and figure out where your unmute button is, I think that might be a good use of time. And also, you can go ahead and start asking questions in the questions box. Should be, I think, on your right-hand side. That way, if you have any questions on anything I am discussing, we can go over that during the discussion part at the end as well. So with that, I'll go ahead and get started. So just to give a brief overview of what we know so far, and if you've been listening to any of the national webinars or conferences or everything that seems to be happening every other day, most of it should look, if not all of it, should look very familiar. That's basically where we're getting our information, is the same places you'll be getting your information. So we know that nationally there's $1 billion available in CSBG funds. We know that the funds can be spent through federal fiscal year 2022, which means September 30th, 2022. We know that these funds have to follow all the same rules as regular CSBG funds, except for income eligibility. And we know that the funds are going to have to be tracked separately from regular funds. And I want to make a special note of that. I think that's something that the partners have started talking about, and that's something that, as we are expecting the funds to come in, make sure that you are thinking of ways to track funds separately. And we'll also need separate documents that basically mirror the regular CSBG funds. We're going to need a separate community needs assessment or community needs assessment amendment. We're not expecting full community needs assessments. It doesn't sound like that's what OCS has been recommending, but we will need something that shows that you are taking stock of what your community needs right now. We are going to need some form of a community action plan for these funds specifically. We are going to need a separate state plan for these funds, and at some point we're going to need separate reporting for all of these funds. From what the national partners have said, including OCS, the bare minimum that we'll have to be able to answer for is how the funds were spent, who they were spent on, and how many people were served, with these funds separate from the regular funds. So that's one of the big takeaways I want you all to have from today is what processes you'll have to put in place, what plans you'll have to implement to make sure that everything is tracked separately. In addition to that information, an IM was released specifically from OCS. It provided some clarification on the income eligibility. That is the one item of these funds that will act differently than the regular CSBG funds. Regular CSBG funds, you can go up to 125% for income eligibility to receive CSBG services. This guidance clarified that the CARES Act raises that to 200% of the federal poverty guidelines, and that is for spending in federal fiscal year 2020 and 2021. And so we know, based on this guidance, that includes 2020 regular funds and 2021 regular funds, in addition to the funding coming from CARES Act. So it's not just the CARES Act funds that raise that income eligibility limit. It also goes for the regular 2020 and 2021 funds. There has been a question raised about 2019 carryover funds. Based on the phone call that Janelle from OCS was on, it seems like they are open to allowing that income increase for 2019 carryover funds, but that has not been put into writing yet. So that's why right now what we know is that it's for 2020, 2021, and the CARES Act funds. And that I am also clarified that staff salaries and benefits can be charged to active CSBG awards as long as it's following your normal or your emergency policies. And this goes for all federal, this all goes for this goes across all funding sources, both federal and non-federal. And again, that's just clarification from this IM. We are expecting additional information from OCS in addition to the funds. So based on what we've heard from OCS, it sounds like the funds should be coming first. We're expecting that, we were told this week, although based on timelines that they've mentioned previously, I wouldn't be surprised if that gets pushed back a week or two. But hopefully this week that the funds will arrive to us at IHCDA. And we are expecting somewhere around 150% of what we have received as a state in the past. Now that is based on OCS telling us that the funding formulas remain unchanged at their level and that we should follow our same funding formulas. So based on the national, what is being released nationally, which is what we know, we are expecting 150% of what we get normally as a state. But again, that has not been put into writing. So don't make any hard bets on that. And the reason that I put a range on this slide, 130 to 150%, is actually for your all's, help you all plan a little bit more. Based on your 2019 funds, you all received a little bit more than 90%. As a network, we are, as a state, we have to give 90% to the network no matter what. But in 2019, or for 2019 funds, we gave a little bit extra. We had some unspent admin and discretionary funds. So we granted that out to you all as a network using the regular funding allocation. So you got a little bit more than 90% based on your 2019 funds. So that's why I included the range, that it won't be 100, you won't receive 150% of what you got in 2019. It might be a slightly smaller percentage. In addition to the funds, it sounds like a little bit after the funds arrive, we'll get some guidance, which seems a little backwards, but that's just what OCS, how they're planning it. They have told us that they will send out additional guidance. I believe another IM is in the works. And at the very least, they have mentioned that it should include firm guidance on whether or not the income eligibility can be raised for 2019 carryover. And it sounds like they will provide additional guidance on using funds for technology. That's a question that nationally has come up quite a bit. We're hoping that they'll provide additional guidance on that. We are also expecting a state plan template from OCS. We've been told that we have to submit a state plan like we do for regular funds. We have absolutely no idea what format that will be, other than it will be submitted through the same system. We have no idea what kind of questions, how many questions are going to be involved in that. And then eventually, as they've stated, we will need to be able to report on these funds. We don't know what that reporting is going to look like. I imagine it will be somewhat similar to questions that are asked on that annual report, most likely a toned down version of that, but again, have absolutely no clear idea of what that will look like. So those are things that we are still waiting for from OCS. And based on what we know and what we've been told to expect, we at IHCDA have taken a few steps, and we are currently making plans for additional steps. What we've done so far is we've increased the allowable admin on your 2020 CSBG funds. We've raised that up to 36%. And then we published additional guidance that affirms the increase for income eligibility. And what OCS posted was that states are allowed to make that increase, but they could not direct us to do so as a state. But we went ahead and decided to take that step and allow for the increase that they allowed for. And then we also provide additional information on using CSBG for technology, again, based on what we know so far. We are hoping for additional guidance, if not maybe some waiving of normal rules, but based on what we know so far, we provided information on what you can do now to pay for technology. And what we're working on currently as next steps, we are creating community needs assessment templates and community action plan templates. Now, the community needs assessment, the National Partnership posted a template that they've created, and we reviewed that template and we actually like it a lot. So what I'm working on right now is actually just a slightly toned down version of that. They included a lot of context in that document, which looks great, but in terms of us being able to review that documentation, it would just add a lot of unnecessary work. So right now I'm taking any questions from their template and putting that into a separate document for everyone to be able to fill in. So that being said, while I'm working on that, if you haven't already, I would recommend taking a look at that template that they posted, and I can send it to you if you need help locating that. And taking a look at the information that they've included in there or something you should be looking up in your community, and just go ahead and start pulling that information. They provide a ton of resources in that template. It's one of the reasons we really like it. You can go ahead and start filling that in. Now we are somewhat open. If you have another idea for a community needs assessment or community needs assessment amendment to your current one, we're open to discussing that. So if you want to reach out, and we'll make that clear when we post our version of their template. If you have an idea, especially if you've already started implementing something, we want to be open to that. But we do think that the template the National Partnership came up with covers a lot of ground and provides great resources. So why reinvent the wheel, right? And at the same time, we're coming up with a template for community action plans. Again, it'll be a toned down version of what you normally submit for regular CSBG funds. We're not going to ask all the same questions. We'll probably ask more in-depth questions about the programs that you plan to support or the actions that you plan to take with the CARES Act funding. And that's because we are getting a lot of questions about this funding from the governor's office. And you'll see the other thing that we are having to work on is a state plan that we need to submit to the governor's office. We've been told that we cannot grant out any CARES Act funds until we get some sort of plan for those funds to the governor's office and have them approve it. So know that there are a lot of eyes on these funds. We've been told that at the national level we'll be asked a lot of questions, but also at the state level we're going to be getting a lot of questions. So that's why the template for the community action plan, it might not ask all the same questions as the regular plan, such as your greatest management accomplishment or linkages, but we'll probably ask for a little bit more in-depth information about the programs that you plan to support with the funding. We think that's what those in the state and the federal level will be interested in knowing. So I hope to get those templates to you pretty quickly. We need to get the state plan to the governor's office, hopefully in the next week or two. It will be separate from the state plan we have to do from OCS, partially because we have no idea what OCS needs for their state plan. We do know we'll need to submit one in the next month or two. But the state plan to the governor's office right now is probably going to be just a couple of pages explaining CSBG as it normally acts, and then the information that we know based on the CARES Act and the intention for these funds at the federal level, and then our intention here at the state level. All right, so that's what we know so far and what we are currently working on. At this point, I'm going to shoot this over to Emily so she can start opening up the conversation about how you all plan to use the funds. And then also if we have any questions, it looks like a couple of questions have been asked. We can cover those during the discussion as well. So Emily, are you ready to take over?
I am.
Wonderful.
And the questions were just about getting the webinar up and running. So if you have additional questions, please do go ahead and post those in the questions box. So I wanted to start off by just going through some of the uses of the funds. And this isn't anything I think new, but we wanted to bring this up just so that you all can be thinking about it as you think about what to put in your community action plan. So first is a clarification that these funds aren't necessarily supposed to be used only to serve people who had COVID-19 or had a family member with COVID-19, but instead are really meant to address the short and long-term impacts of COVID-19 on communities. So that could be the effect of closing businesses and changing economic situations in the community. There are a lot of people who are impacted by COVID-19, basically everyone impacted by COVID-19 that didn't necessarily have an acute case of it in their family. And to know that this is both short and long term, there is a larger window than 1 year to be working on this. and to spend some of those funds. We don't know everything right now. We're still kind of learning about what the impacts of COVID-19 are going to be over time. And these funds are meant to really address the economic impacts of those of COVID-19 in your community. So be thinking kind of big picture, and in some cases long-term, in some cases short-term, maybe have a mix of different ways to address this, some short-term fixes, some long-term fixes. So think a little bit about that. The uses must be tied to that community needs assessment. And if you take a look at that template that was put out, the needs assessment is focused specifically around COVID-19. What is the health system doing? Who's impacted? How many cases have you had? What are people in your community doing? What are the needs that have come up since then? So your community action plan will be expected to tie back to some of those things that you found in that abbreviated community needs assessment. And we'll ask for each program how it does tie back to that. It should be used in partnership with other organizations. So in cases where it's possible to partner with your local homeless shelter, your local feeding ministries, things like that, I know your organizations are already doing that, but definitely note that broader community approach to addressing the effects of COVID-19. Be thinking about that, be thinking about how you want to partner, how you want to work with other agencies to use this funding to address the community's needs. It can be used on current programs that you're running. If you anticipate an increased need for a program, for program funds in a specific area, by all means, it can be used for that. It also can be used for new programs, something new you want to stand up or lift up, something new maybe a partner was running, but they need some additional help because they see a big impact as a result of COVID-19. So it can be some current stuff. It can be expanding on current stuff. It could be something new. You could want to create a brand new program or a brand new way to come in into your agency. It can be used for that sort of thing as well. And then also this can be subgranted. If you're seeing a need in your community that somebody else, some other organization is best suited to do that work, to do that outreach, to do that task, absolutely these funds can be subgranted from your agency to someone who is better suited to do that task, as long as it's based on that need that you find in the community needs assessment. So please be thinking about all those different ways of looking at what is possible, what are possible uses of those funds, tying it back to what your community needs really strongly, and being able to make that argument, I think, is what we're particularly interested in as we go through these next steps of getting this funding out. So with that being said, I'm actually going to unmute you all, so you'll want to mute yourself on your end if you're not talking. There we go. You should unmute all participants. Attendees will have full audio control. Yes. All right, Veronica, I just tried to unmute everybody twice, and I am not sure that that worked. Can you try to? I see some people are starting to become unmuted and are muting themselves. Perfect.
Yeah, I'm just going to maybe go ahead and try and unmute everyone individually. It seems like that's maybe working, unless people muted themselves automatically. Maybe that's what the issue was, but we'll figure it out. We will get everyone unmuted.
Okay, I'm starting at the bottom to unmute people. So we will do that. So what I really want to do is ask, just kind of so that we can get a feel for what's going on in your world. What are your current plans? What are your thoughts around uses for these program funds? Does anybody have any, oh, I was really hoping to use it on this and it seems to fit kind of things, or even questions about how you might use some of that? And if for some reason you're trying to talk and can't, raise your hand or shoot me a question.
Hey, there's more out there. You can find it. Yeah, there's ground beef out there.
All right, I can hear somebody talking, but I don't think it's talking to us. All right. You don't have anybody with current plans or thoughts on what they're going to use this new CSBG funding for? All right. Please feel free to answer that question as we continue talking. The other question that I have is, I know from our end, we're going to create a separate line item in the claims system so that you'll be able to claim these funds separately from your annual funds. But does anybody have ideas now on how they intend to track the funds separately on your end, or any concerns with doing so?
Emily, this is Veronica. I'm going to jump in here and add a little bit to that. So I just want to point out to everyone, I'm sure you've all, for those of you that work with your contracts and claims, are aware of this. But you will normally have, for most of the year, you have 2 contracts that you have access to or that are live, but you can only ever claim from one award or one contract at a time. So basically at IHCDA, we force you to track the funds separately by only allowing you to draw from funds one at a time. The way that these funds are going to work, we won't be able to do that. You will have both 2020 open at the same time as these CARES Act funds, and then later 2021 open at the same time as these funds. So that's why we are particularly interested in, at the agency level, what your plans are for tracking these separately. Are you going to assign programs or projects to different awards? Or do you have any other plans for that?
All right, somebody recommended that for the audio, we have folks raise their hand if they'd like to talk and unmute them specifically if they do raise their hand. So we're happy to do that. If you'd like to speak, please go ahead and raise your hand, and we'll make sure we get you unmuted.
And we do have an answer from Joyce on the question for how we'll use our funds. Looks like she's still having some audio issues. Sorry about that, Joyce. But yeah, it looks like they will be using their funds for rent and mortgage assistance at the very least. So is anyone else seeing those same needs?
Veronica, this is Alyssa. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. We have a plan to potentially use it for some technology if that ends up being a possibility. But also, like Joyce, we plan to help with mortgages, rent assistance, utility assistance, whatever kind of the emergent needs are of families. And I feel like that part we're going to see as they start coming to us in the next few weeks with, you know, their biggest problems that they're having right now. Also, we hope to help support maybe some of the local food pantries to make sure that people are getting the food that they need, or other nonprofit organizations in the area that are also serving low-income families. However, we can partner with them.
Awesome, thank you.
Great, and for those of you who are looking for rent and mortgage assistance to be one of the focuses of your funding, I encourage you to, if you're not one of those agencies that is currently administering ESG, so Emergency Solutions Grant, to address homelessness, you might partner with or start talking to someone in your community who is offering that. I know that there was some additional federal funding that came through that program. And I think in our next listening session or one upcoming, we'll have somebody come and talk about that grant funding in communities so that those partnerships can become strong between community action agencies over the next few months.
It looks like we have another one having issues with audio. So Gina saying that they will be using theirs for to cover food to the elderly and to cover emergency needs. So thank you, Gina. I do have another question somewhat related. It sounds like we're still, when we ask the question of how you're going to use the funds, it sounds like we're still, a lot of you are still almost waiting, that the biggest needs haven't hit yet, that's probably going to come in the next couple of weeks. So I'm curious if any agencies that you partner with or any other agencies in your community are starting to see more immediate needs or are seeing that uptick in clients even more so than you are now. And if you're partnering with them to either assist or kind of use that to plan for your own response later. All right, Joyce for the save says that looks like you are seeing immediate needs from your community for rent, utilities, mortgage assistance, and healthcare navigation. And I believe I've heard from at least one other agency that healthcare navigation is a concern for them as well. So thank you, Joyce, for raising that. Okay. So does anyone else have any other thoughts or questions or concerns? We still got quite a bit of time. We can certainly end this early, but you now have the floor to make any comments, questions, raise concerns. I know we have our weekly chats. I know you all have been very responsive to those and raising a lot of concerns or questions through that. But here's your chance to ask anything specific for CSBG. Okay, so we do have a question about how the funds will be claimed. So and if I can elaborate on that. So right now, our loose plan is that we will have a separate contract for these funds. So your EDs will have to sign a contract similar to what you sign normally in like November or December for the next fiscal year's funds. And once we have those contracts signed, we will set up a whole new award in IHCDA online. And so you will be able to claim against that award through, September 30th, 2022. And you will be able to claim against that at the same time as you claim against regular CSBG funds. There's not really a way that we can see. If you have any ideas, feel free to shoot that to me, but there's not really a way that we can see to stagger the awards like we normally do regular awards. You know, normally you have to spend 2019 funds before you can get to 2020 funds. So we can't really do that right now, at least not for the whole network. I think some agencies are spending their 2020 funds pretty quickly given the increased need. And so you might be able to stagger that and then, you know, spend 2020 and then get to your CARES Act funds. But I don't think that's going to be possible for everyone. I don't think that you're going to be able to spend all your CARES Act funds before 2021 funds become available. So, so that's why we're curious if anyone has any ideas for how they are going to keep those separate, both in terms of funding, and I think that also relates back to keeping the reporting separate. OCS has made it pretty clear that at the bare minimum, we're going to have to be able to answer how many people did you serve? And that's going to be separate from how many people you serve with normal CSBG funds. So just that idea of keeping everything separate while still spending the money at the same time and running all the programs at the same time is something we are interested in to see what everyone has planned. And it could be you don't have firm plans yet, since we don't have a lot of firm information or the funding available yet. So at the very least, you want to put it in your all's head to start thinking through that. Yeah, and Joyce is saying that they've got some additional IT needs, law technology needs. I know that's something that quite a few agencies are particularly concerned about. So that's why we did address it in the guidance that we put out, just based on what we know so far. And we're hoping to get additional information from OCS with this next IM. So hopefully, Joyce, we'll get a little bit more to address some of your needs. Okay, well, seeing and hearing nothing else. Emily, are we okay to call it early?
Oh, absolutely. I just wanted to make sure that we had a chance to answer any questions you all have. I know that this is kind of a difficult time, especially because we are hearing that there is more money coming and it has different rules around it. And we're not sure exactly when or how much or any of that. We just wanted to get a chance to talk to you all and let you know what we know so far and give you a chance to ask us questions. So if nobody has more questions, we're happy to give you a few minutes of your day back.
Yeah, and of course, if you do have questions more specific to your particular situation or your agency or something you just want to talk through with us, we are certainly open to being available to set up a discussion with you or answer anything over email. We try to be as available as possible over email. So feel free to reach out to us if you do have additional questions or concerns. We definitely want to address those as you have them. So nothing else, I'll go ahead and end the webinar. Thank you all for joining us. We will I'll go ahead and send the slides out to everyone right after this so you have access to those.
Thanks, everybody.
Yes, thank you. Have a great day.